Tiaras, sashes, trophies. On stage, she was a picture-perfect beauty queen. Off stage, she was a playful, curious little girl who loved nature and her family. So what happened the day after Christmas that left a little girl dead and a family thrust into the spotlight? This week's topic is the death of JonBenét Ramsey, Part 1.
A bump in the night, your heart fills with dread. Probably a murderer who wants you dead. It could be a ghost, a demon, or worse. Perhaps you're the victim of a witch's curse. It's hopeless, you're doomed. You'd call a priest if you could. You'd rather just listen to who? Sinisterhood.
Well, there's just nothing I like more than a case that has one of us on one side and one of us on the other side. But then in this situation, we vehemently switched.
What do you mean?
Well, initially you were pretty hemmed up about what you thought, and then you sort of
I still
changed.
don't know what I think, to be honest.
That's true. And I really didn't know anything, but I had a gut instinct, and I've totally changed. And then I've changed again, and I'll probably change again before part 2.
This is one of those cases where there are several theories, and there is evidence to support all of them, and there's evidence to discredit all of them.
That is true. And
so whatever camp you subscribe to, you can find stuff on the internet that bolsters your claims.
That is true.
Or you can find stuff that says, no, you're wrong. So because it's unsolved, no one knows, and
That's
no
true.
one's right.
There's
so
no
everyone
definitive
just
answer.
Has opinions, yeah.
Even the people who were actually there have different opinions. And as I told you, I was on Reddit just briefly to take the pulse of the internet. And someone said, absolutely.
That's a good place to do it.
Oh, someone said, absolutely, this happened. And the response was, no, it did not. And then a response said, nuh-uh, it did. And another response said, it didn't.
That should be the poster for Reddit, how to deal with Reddit.
Just people yelling at each other on the internet.
Screaming into a void.
It makes sense.
I'm Christy.
I'm Heather.
And this week we are discussing the case that fascinates me more than all the cases, JonBenét Ramsey. And
it's funny, I was 10 years old when this happened, and I distinctly remember seeing the interviews on CNN, and I can't quite, if I'm as an eyewitness, I potentially am incorrectly attributing this to my mom of they killed her. The parents are hiding something like that. But, everyone kind of had an opinion on it, somewhat like OJ.
Sure.
And
it happened not too long after OJ.
That is true. And some of the experts were used on this case as well. And it's just interesting that it was such a part of the cultural zeitgeist at the time that even I was a little kid and I'm not reading magazines. I'm not really watching the news. And I still remember that this was around. It was
she was all over every magazine and every checkout in the grocery. You couldn't watch the news without hearing about it.
Seriously. She was, and I think it was not only because it was such a tragic crime, it happened in such a bizarre way, but for a large swath of the United States, child beauty pageants is an insane concept.
Yes.
That is something that is just not done. This is before Toddlers and Tiaras, before any reality shows. It was videos of a little girl sashaying around with her midriff showing with a bunch of makeup on. Yes, with a bunch of makeup on. And people from parts of the country that had never seen that were flabbergasted. And then you start making a connection. Oh, if your kid is doing this, maybe the outcome is that you're putting them out for sex predators or you get really mad and you're an enraged mom and you kill them. So it's just an interesting anomaly as far as that was a kind of weird hobby they had.
It opens you up to a lot of judgment and assumptions.
That's true too.
We're going to break this whole series up into a couple of episodes. So tonight we're just going to be talking about the night of.
Correct.
In
the morning
of.
The
morning of, yes. And then the next episode is when we'll get into the actual theories and suspects because there are a lot of them.
Yes. There are bookfuls.
Oh, yes.
Books
yeah,
and books
yeah.
and books.
I mean, we could do a 10-part series on this case.
And still not cover it all.
Yeah. I mean, it happened 22 years ago. It's still one of the most high-profile cases of the country that just fascinates people.
Oh, definitely.
Because it's never been solved, and it was at the end of the day, as fascinating as this case may be, a 6-year-old girl was brutally murdered, and it's very sad. And I do have to say, researching this affected me a lot different now than when this case first happened, because now I'm even tearing up. You're
so sweet. You guys, Christy's crying for real.
I'm a heartless the third episode in a row of crying.
You're just crying. I'm a heartless, motherless wench, or childless wench, so I'm not crying.
You have a mother. Yeah.
I know I have a mother, but I'm a childless wench. But I think
it is different to
you picture yourself
to read these things as a mom now, because it's just it's sad. It's very sad.
Oh no!
So I've cried now about E.T.
I think this one's a little more appropriate.
JonBenét. There was something else I cried about too. Hamilton.
Hamilton. I spontaneously started crying at Toy Story. It's fine.
As you see, I cry very easily. It's all right. Also, being a mother, I cry very easily.
Oh, that's true. My friend Elise in Philadelphia texted me after you mentioned crying easily at the ET, and she said, I also cry spontaneously. Yes. It's a thing.
All the time.
She's right.
Time. Yeah.
So I think we should definitely just go through the day of timeline, and then in the next episode, like you said, we'll go over the suspect list and some of the theories. So
let's get into this. So on December 26th, 1997, at 5:52 a.m. in Boulder, Colorado, 6-year-old JonBenét Ramsey was reported kidnapped by her mother. Just hours earlier, the entire family had been at a Christmas party, celebrating with friends, before returning home around 10 p.m. Patsy, the mother, claimed that JonBenét fell asleep on the car ride home, and her husband John later carried her upstairs to bed.
Which, this is well documented. There was a bunch of people at the party. It was the Whites, Fleet, and his wife.
Patricia.
That's right. The White family, which probably in Colorado was most of them. Just kidding. This was,
especially in Boulder.
Well, in Boulder, it's a very progressive. I texted Leanne, who is from Colorado Springs Denver area. She's lived in both of them. Well, she's from Dallas, but she's lived there. And she said that Boulder is a super progressive town, but it's also super wealthy. It's home of University of Colorado, and it's got a very beautiful facade on the outside, and then it also has fairly progressive, and some would even say lax, law enforcement situation going on here.
Sure.
Especially
as a lot of wealthy areas do.
I was going to say, especially if you're like these people and you are multimillionaires.
Sure. Well, later that day, JonBenét was found dead in her home. She sustained a broken skull from a blow to the head and had been strangled, presumably with the homemade garrote found tied around her neck.
Garrotes make me so scared because of the TV show Dexter. I've only ever seen the first episode.
Oh, really?
And he garroted a person.
It's a good series, but it jumps the shark. Does it? Yeah.
Yeah, he garroted a person, and it makes me very scared when I get in my car because the guy got in the front seat of his car.
Yes,
he got into his driver's seat, and Dexter garroted him. And now every time I think of a garrote, I think of Dexter.
So a garrote, for those that may not know what this is
and haven't seen the TV show Dexter,
or have the internet where you could just Google it really quickly, but it's essentially a rope or some sort of device that has
like a string situation.
Yes, that has a piece of wood or some other kind of handle that you can put around someone's neck and then pull the handle very tightly to strangle them. It's like what the mob may do.
Correct.
I think in Goodfellas, don't they get in the car and do that to someone that's sitting in the front seat?
I wouldn't doubt it.
Probably.
They Dextered him.
Yes, they did. Well, a homemade garrote was found tied around her neck. The autopsy report stated that the official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma and was ruled a homicide. The case generated nationwide public and media interest, in part because her mother Patsy, herself a former beauty queen, had entered JonBenét in a series of child beauty pageants.
True, and Patsy was 14 years younger than John.
Yes.
It was his second wife. So when they met, he was divorced. He had 3 older children.
One of them was deceased. She had died in a car accident at 22.
Correct. And they said that Patsy was basically the ultimate trophy wife.
Yes.
She was former Miss West Virginia. Her sister was also Miss West Virginia, and they were the first siblings to accomplish that. And pageants were big with Patsy's mom and the family and Patsy, and they said she just was stoked to have a daughter that was not only able to do it, but able to do it well and also win.
Yes. Following in her footsteps.
Correct.
While there are numerous theories and suspects, 22 years later, the crime is still unsolved and remains an open investigation with the Boulder Police Department. So we're going to give a cursory timeline of events that happened that day, and then go into some of the more standout red flags for what initially started police thinking something isn't right here.
And so they said Christmas Day, the kids woke up, ran downstairs. There's photos of JonBenét and Burke opening their presents. And there's the last photo of JonBenét was taken with her in Patsy's lap.
Yes.
And they're smiling, having opened their Christmas presents. They go to the White's party about 5:30. They eat dinner around 8:30. They leave around 10, get home a little bit after 10. They were going to go to Michigan the next day.
Yes, to their home they have there.
Correct.
On their private plane.
Yes, these are multimillionaires.
They are very, very wealthy.
They're not just
and it is very well known that they are wealthy.
Yeah, I'd say they're not just kind of rich. They're super millionaire
very
rich.
Yeah. Yes.
They're not like Bill Gates rich, but they're multi-millionaire rich.
They're doing well. They had a yacht, a couple of planes, a couple of houses. They were not hurting.
Correct. They said they bought this house in Michigan that they bought was a beautiful old Victorian style house, and she basically gutted it and totally redid it and was trying to be they were society people. They wanted to be seen, they wanted to see and be seen, as they
were
say.
Hostesses, they loved having parties and had a huge network of friends.
Correct. So then they said everybody goes to bed and Patsy's packing and then she goes to bed.
Yes.
And the morning she wakes up, she's going to go down the back staircase. They had a big staircase in the front. That's how you know you're rich.
You got two staircases.
Yes. The family frequently used the back staircase.
Which was a spiral staircase.
She comes down the spiral staircase, and on the third staircase up,
she finds a ransom note.
Correct.
Yes.
Laid out. The 3 pages laid out.
Very
side
neatly
by
laid
side.
out on this staircase. She finds the ransom note. 5:52 a.m., she makes the 911 call. 5:54 a.m., she then calls family friends.
She calls Fleet and Patricia.
Kind of odd.
Correct. And she called another couple.
Yes.
They all come over.
5:59 a.m., the first responding officer arrives at the scene. So sometime after 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., more friends arrive, crime scene investigators arrive, and a victim's advocate arrive.
And let's remember, this is December 26th, so it's the day after Christmas. This is not the A-team of the cops.
No.
Because most of them are on vacation. And recently a new police chief had taken over and had basically reorganized how the police hierarchy was. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot less military style where it's like lieutenant, sergeant, captain. Yes. And it was everyone's a sergeant. So when they needed people to show up, they're like, call sergeant.
That's what you call the bystander effect. Everyone thinks somebody else is doing it, so nobody does it.
Correct. And then they had also hired this victim's advocate who was described as kind of a hippie flower child lady who was just there to talk about people's feelings.
And victim's advocate do serve a very good purpose.
They do, but that was a newer role in the department at this time.
Yes.
And just another set of hands to come, and we'll see.
We will get into that. So 8:10 a.m., Detective Linda Arndt arrives and begins investigation, but fails to secure the crime scene.
Well, everyone wanted to be polite.
Well, guess what? That's why no one knows who the hell did this to this day.
No one said, everybody sit your ass down on the couch. No one leaves the living room.
No one's going anywhere. Stop fucking cleaning. Stop going through and taking things and throwing them out. Stop coming in and going and walking all around.
Yeah.
At 8:15 a.m., Ron Walker, a behavior analyst for the FBI, is contacted by Detective Linda Arndt. At 10:30 a.m., Detective Arndt, who has been at the home, notices John Ramsey is nowhere to be found.
Oh, you know.
He claims later that he went to get the mail. But considering their mail is delivered through a mail slot in the front door, this didn't really make sense.
Also, it's 8:30 in the morning the day after Christmas Day. Or 10:30 in the morning the day after Christmas Day.
Yes.
The mail ain't come.
Your daughter's missing.
Who gives a shit about the mail?
Where the hell are you going? What are you expecting in the mail?
No.
That you give a shit about? At 11 a.m., Ron Walker arrives at the Boulder Police Headquarters. He was in another city in Colorado, so when he gets the call to come in, he gathers all of his stuff in and then just drives into Boulder and arrives at 11 a.m. 11:45 a.m., Walker meets with Sergeant Mason and gets his first look at the ransom note, which we will talk about in a minute, and he immediately believes it is a red herring.
Same.
Yes.
I have the same opinion as the FBI behavioral analyst.
I do too, and I think that makes us FBI behavior.
I think so. We are officially...
Yay!
Congratulations.
I've been wanting to be one for a while, so I'm glad we're now that.
Man, I'd love to be an FBI agent. Can't pass the physical.
Oh, God,
But I got a lot more to offer.
What do you have to do, run a mile in like 5 minutes?
Okay, so I've looked this up. It's not exclusively. I've looked this up intensively. You have to get points. It's a certain point system, and so you have to do so many sit-ups in 60 seconds, and you get certain points. So many push-ups in 60 seconds. Super out. And you have to run a mile in so many minutes, and for every minute you're over, maybe like 12, which isn't a ton, but every minute you're over, you like lose points, and so it's basically an overall fitness thing.
Well, I would be negative, whatever the highest negative is you can get.
I think I would just be, ma'am, please leave points.
Ma'am, stop wasting our time. Get out of here. There's a Krispy Kreme around the corner.
I'm allergic to donuts.
Oh, does Krispy Kreme not have gluten-free?
They should.
They don't?
No, they do not.
That's very surprising.
Oh,
I bet Hypnotic Donuts does.
Nope, they do not.
They don't either?
Nope.
What about the one in Deep Ellum?
Nope. If you ask for a gluten-free donut at a donut store, you immediately get thrown out. Unrefined Bakery, which is the gluten-free bakery in town, rarely has gluten-free donuts, and they'll tweet about it, and you have to go, and they get sold out.
Kelsey Merritt was telling me that her and our friend Scriven went to Unrefined Bakery the other day, and I'd never heard of this place, but she said if you're paleo or
keto,
gluten-free or keto, that they have, you feel like you're getting a little treat.
You do,
even though it's as healthy as, I guess, a cupcake can be. Well, at noon, Arndt notifies Sergeant Mason that John is still missing. He then shows back up, and Arndt claims that when he reappears, his demeanor has changed, and he's now agitated. At 1 p.m., Detective Arndt tells John Ramsey and the Ramseys' family friend, Fleet White, who was there, that they need to search the house top to bottom. Allegedly, Ramsey grabs White and makes a beeline for the basement. 1:05 p.m., John and Fleet find JonBenet's body. John carries her up the stairs and lays her body on the living room floor. Okay, well, good job. You just fucked this whole situation up. You took her from the scene of the crime, up the stairs, laid her in another area. Good job. Now, her body's been in 2 places. Oh, but wait, at 1:10 p.m., Detective Arndt moves her body again. There's now 3 different locations her body has been.
Bunch of people touching her.
At 3 different crime scenes. Yes, and people have walked all over that carpet where he laid her down.
Correct.
Have handled her. He was cradling her. Patsy was laying over her. People were putting clothes on her.
Yep, they covered her with a blanket. They covered her feet with a sweater.
Yes.
They were, it was...
Which I have to admit, God forbid something like this sort of happened in my life, I would 100% pick her up, and I wouldn't give a shit about the crime scene.
Correct.
That's not where your head is at. And I also would have picked her up from the floor and ran upstairs with her, too.
Which makes sense, but you're also, if you're the police detective, you're like, hey, buddy, I get it. You have to put her down. You have to put her down. Do not touch anything else.
And you also don't move her again. You just quarantine the area where he's laid her, and now we're dealing with this.
Yes.
Keep her in as few places as possible.
No, Detective Arndt, bless your heart. You did your best, but Jesus fucking Christ.
No.
Everything she did was
Did she do her best?
No.
I think she did her worst.
The Detective Steve Thomas that wrote JonBenét, the kind of definitive pro-police theory book that I read, he goes, basically, the first 6 hours was everything they teach you on day 1 of the academy not to do.
She just threw out the rule book.
They let the couple stay together over, and they could whisper to each other. They let him wander off. They lost sight of where he was. He was walking around their house. He could have been wiping things down or racing, whatever. And he just said, it's everything they teach you not to do on day 1. That's exactly what happened. Yes. Those 6 hours.
Walker said that he told Arndt, you need to give him busy work, and you need to stay with him.
Correct.
So you can analyze his behavior, see where he goes, see where he doesn't go, listen to what he says, and more importantly, what he's not saying, see his reactions to things. And that's why he said, tell them to search the house.
Correct.
It was just busy work to kind of see what his behavior was like.
Exactly. So that they could just watch his reactions to things.
Yes. At 1:30, Walker and Mason finally arrive at the Ramseys' home and secure the crime scene, preventing anyone else from coming or going. She was found at the call was made at 5:52. At 1:30, we now have a secure crime scene.
Wow.
That's pretty wild.
Think of everything that was destroyed in the interim.
Yes. At 1:40 p.m., John allegedly is overheard by a detective calling his pilot and asking him to prepare the plane. The police tell them the Ramseys cannot leave town.
It's a natural reaction.
If that's true, and again, like we said, there's arguments that would say this is false. There's arguments that say this is true. If it is true, that is very damning evidence.
It seems to be you're immediately trying to leave town.
Yes. And even if he claims that I wasn't just trying to leave town because I'm guilty, why are you trying to leave town at all? Your daughter was just murdered in your home.
Don't you care who
Aren't
did
you
it?
going to stay and talk to the police and to help in any way you can? No, they didn't. They didn't give a police interview for months, actually.
120 days.
So at 1:45, the Ramseys leave their home to go stay with their friends, the Fernies. At 2:30 p.m., police interview Jonbenet's brother Burke, who reportedly was the only other person in the house the time all of this happened. He claims he was asleep the previous night, stayed asleep the entire night, and was in his room all day, even though he knew something was terribly wrong. He never went downstairs to ask his parents what was going on, never poked his head out of the bedroom door to say, "Hey, what's the deal here?" He said his dad at one point ran into his room, saw he was awake, looked around, reportedly like to see if JonBenét was there or whatever, left. I'm sorry. We both have siblings. If you knew your parents, something awful was going on and they were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, wouldn't you go see what the hell was going on?
Yeah,
He said he was too scared to know what was happening.
Okay.
He's 9 years old. I don't buy it.
Yeah, and they said that Fleet White's kid had gone missing a few months earlier, but she was just hiding in the house. Mm-hmm. How rich you are that you can lose a child in your home.
Right.
And they found her later. So it was one of those where they were kind of going room to room of maybe she's just playing a really bad game of hide and seek. Mm-hmm. But you think that Burke would be, if he was awake and heard commotion, and you can even look out your window, theoretically, I don't know if his window faced the front or the back, but see a police car.
You're going to hear all sorts of voices
that aren't normal.
How did the police not go and talk to him before this? Or the parents also. If I had two children, I couldn't find one of them, I sure as shit am not letting the other one out of my sight.
Well, don't let them sleep in. Wake up and say, "Did you see your sister? Did you get up?"
Or I would be clutching them with everything I had just because that's where your mind goes. I don't want to lose this one.
We've never been in this situation, so it's hard to judge.
It is hard to say.
However, behaviorally, this is what the FBI agents do, and they've seen 10,000 cases of child abductions and child murders, and they can tell, I won't say proper behavior, but what is more suspicious behavior versus or abnormal behavior. Typical versus abnormal behavior. The Ramseys in this whole situation had very abnormal behavior.
Very atypical behavior,
correct.
Yes. Sometime after 2:30, John Ramsey hires his family friend Mike Bynum as his attorney.
This is seen by a lot of people in the media, especially. They're like, father of slain child hires attorney. And
I don't blame him, honestly.
Seriously.
You're an attorney. That's what you do. You lawyer up. The first thing they're going to look at is the parents.
I'm a lawyer and I lawyer up. Double lawyer.
You should.
Double lawyered.
It's if your spouse gets murdered, even if you have nothing to do with it, get your ass a lawyer because they're coming to look at you first.
Anything ever, always get a lawyer.
Yes.
Not me. I can't represent you guys. I'm not your lawyer. But get somebody.
I saw an interview with Mike Bynum, and he said he was at the house, the Ramseys, the Fernie's house, and a bunch of family friends had gathered there to support them. He said he offered to John, "Hey, I really think you might want to let me take care of some things. Are you cool with me just covering some bases?" And John claims he didn't even know really what that meant, but he said yes.
And that makes sense, too. If you are kind of overwhelmed with a bunch of people in the house and a lawyer comes up and says, "Hey, I think you need me," I would be like, okay, yes, I do.
Yes, absolutely. So that's the timeline from when the 911 call was made until he lawyers up.
So we're going to deep dive into some of these aspects of this first day.
One of the more of the red flag situations.
Correct.
First up is the 911 call, which I have heard about 1 million times at this point.
Same.
At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey called 911 to report that her daughter had been kidnapped. While Patsy sounds upset and frantic, many have questioned the language used by her in the call, the suspicious lack of details, and most notably, the 6 seconds of inaudible dialogue that was recorded after Patsy thought she had hung up.
Yes.
As far as odd language, we have things such as, we have a kidnapping. We is a very odd pronoun to use in this situation.
Instead of saying, my daughter
has been kidnapped, I found a note, my daughter's been kidnapped, we have a kidnapping. Who is we?
Correct.
It's just an odd way to phrase that. Letting her know I'm the mother. Kind of weird behavior.
That they didn't say, I guess she did say my daughter, but the FBI, or he wasn't an FBI, but he's a forensic linguist.
Yes.
Pointed out that the mother was a weird article to use rather than saying I'm her mother.
I'm her mother. Also, she says she's 6 years old, blonde. She never once says her name is Jonbenet.
Yeah.
Why describe what she looks like? Again, just very atypical behavior that one would use in a 911 call.
And the ransom note, which we'll shortly get to, specifically says don't call the police.
Yes,
and
yes.
She
immediately calls the police.
And this next part, I think, is probably one of the most damning parts
of this whole investigation.
And her behavior, especially in these first few minutes.
So typically, when someone calls 911, they do not hang up with the operator until police arrive.
Wouldn't you not?
Hell no, I wouldn't. The police would need to be taking the phone out of my hand.
It's true.
In fact, the operator is instructed in training to tell them to remain on the line until help gets there.
And this operator says her name repeatedly. Yes. Patsy, are you there? Are you still there? She said, I need you to take a deep breath for me. Take a deep breath and calm down.
She was a good operator. Sometimes they can be a little assy, but she was a really good operator. She was
very nice.
The phone and operator is the caller's lifeline. So why would Patsy Ramsey voluntarily hang up the phone when she believes her daughter has been kidnapped? Both Patsy and John Ramsey claimed that their son Burke was asleep in his room upstairs during all of the chaos. However, after Patsy thought she had hung up the phone, there is 6 seconds of an audible dialogue that seems to tell a different story. When state-of-the-art audio enhancements were applied, it appears 3 voices can be heard.
The first is a very stern, parental-like voice.
That sounds like John. And again, they do this audio enhancement on the A&E docuseries, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. Again, they have an angle they're working that they believe in, so all of the evidence they present is kind of skewed one way. But when they do enhance it and slow things down and take out background noise and speed it up, it does say, like John is saying, we're not speaking to you.
We're not speaking to you. It's very, like I said, parental.
Yes.
Like, shut up.
Who's he talking to?
Well,
then it sounds
we're
like...
not speaking to you. I'm not speaking to you.
We're, which implies probably he and his wife.
Correct.
Then you hear Patsy say something to the effect of, what did you do? Or help me, Jesus. It kind of sounds like she may have said one of these or both of these things.
Correct. Either help me, Jesus, twice, or what did you do?
Yes.
What did you do? What did you do? Or what did you do? Help me, Jesus. They're both 4 syllables.
Yes. At this point, you hear a third voice, which sounds very childlike, very different from the other 2 adult voices, which we could assume was Burke.
Yes.
And they said he was asleep during this whole thing.
And he says, what did you find?
What did you find?
You can definitely tell.
Which is a weird word to emphasize. What did you find?
Yeah. And you can tell that it is 3 distinct voices in the enhancement. And even if that's not precisely what they're saying, you can tell it's somewhat similar. It's something close to that.
There are definitely 3 voices, and one of them sounds childlike. Even if these might not be exactly what was said, if Burke was there, they're lying about that.
Yes.
Kim Archuleta, the 911 operator who took the call that morning, said that she stayed on the line after Patsy attempted to hang up because she felt, quote, something wasn't right. In the A&E docuseries, The Case of JonBenét Ramsey, Kim is interviewed for the very first time. She believes after Patsy tried to hang up, she heard her say, okay, we called the police, now what? Kim said there was an immediate change in tone from how Patsy had been speaking to her and how she was now speaking to the other person in the room.
And I will say, so I read 2 books. I read JonBenét by Steve Thomas, it's inside the Ramsey murder investigation. He was a detective. And I read Perfect Murder, Perfect Town by Lawrence Schiller. And in Perfect Murder, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town is pretty anti-Ramseys. It is
pro-intruder.
No. I'm saying
it's the Ramseys did it.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's very damning of them, and particularly his depiction of Patsy Ramsey is that she is like this huge drama queen, and she was an actress, and basically every interview she gave, and then the 911 call, and then when she talked to police officers, that she was an actress, and she was smart enough to be manipulative and was able to basically put on a front.
Yeah.
And so that kind of is in line with what this 911 operator said.
Yes.
Again, that's according to Lawrence Schiller.
Yes.
I never met Patsy Ramsey. I did watch interviews with her.
Which he's not totally off base. She does seem a bit off, but again, I didn't know her in real life.
Well, and in the very first interview, she's 100% on Valium.
Oh.
And they talked about how she's on Valium.
Can you blame her? No matter what happened,
she
her
just sort
daughter's dead.
And and one of her main famous quotes is she's like, I was just telling my friends to hold your babies close. And then later interviews, you can say, she said, I went up and I prayed with JonBenét. You can just tell her vocals in the first interview that she is medicated.
She is.
Which,
yes.
I'm not blaming her, girl.
Hell no.
Not blaming her.
Hell no. Well, Kim also claims that Patsy sounded very rehearsed in her call. She's always felt she had information that could have blown this case wide open. But while the case was being investigated, she was under gag order, which prevented her from being able to talk to the media, and no cops or investigators ever sought out to interview her. She was not even called by the grand jury when this went to the grand jury.
So that A&E docuseries had a big get with her interview because
she said she's been just waiting for someone to talk to her for 20 years.
And it seems like no one ever thought to, or they were like,
or
we don't want to
they
know.
Didn't want to know.
Correct.
Exactly. Yes. Well, after the 911 call, police arrive. At 6 a.m., the first officer arrives on the scene. Like we said, shortly thereafter, friends of the family, crime scene investigators, and a victim's advocate arrived. Because the police were operating under the assumption that this was a kidnapping, and perhaps also just due to gross negligence, the only room in the house that was secured was JonBenét's bedroom. People were coming and going, walking throughout the house, removing items from the house, and wiping down and cleaning surfaces.
They were wiping down the kitchen.
That's so insane.
And the most insane was that the crime scene investigators were going along and fingerprinting. So they were putting the fingerprint dust down, lifting the prints, and then immediately the victim's advocate was walking around with a bottle of Windex.
And no one told her, sit down, lady.
What the fuck are you doing?
What the fuck are you doing? That's insane to me.
Yeah,
it's like a Keystone Cops episode.
It's like a joke.
Yeah.
That she thought, well, and I kind of see where she's coming from. Although you work for the police department, so have 2 brain cells to rub together.
Right.
I know that you're destroying a crime scene, but I'm assuming as a victim's advocate, she thought these poor parents had to go through this. They don't want to see all these fingerprint smudges everywhere. It reminds them that a crime happened.
And people clean when they're
nervous.
Looking for something to do and nervous and trying to help.
Correct.
So I get that. But like you said, she works with the police. And even if she's too dumb to realize she's screwing something up, a cop should have stepped in and said, hello.
Shut it down. Stop that.
What are you doing?
Put the Windex and the bounty paper towels down.
Maybe we wait until at least it's been a few hours. Well, the crime scene was completely contaminated, and there is no way of knowing what may have been discovered had the police not allowed this to happen.
Correct. And they said Fleet White was sort of walking around because he was uncomfortable, nervous, whatever. And then he said he walked down in the basement, he saw some glass, he kind of moved it. Everyone was just sort of like touching stuff, wandering around.
Laissez-faire all over this
touching
damn house.
Stuff in the living or in the kitchen, touch stuff in the living room. Like, a bunch of people were, looking at the ransom note, which
just touching that.
Oh yeah,
have their fingerprints all over it. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, and maybe because they didn't know her body was just feet away, and it was an actual murder scene. There was a little more lax going on, but still, it's still a crime scene.
One of the most horrific pictures is of the door that shut. And at the moment that the photo was taken, she was behind the door. And nobody knew to open it. Multiple cops had gone down there and looked and thought, well, there's like a weird latch up top. So somebody couldn't have latched that back behind themselves. So, there's probably nothing in there and there's no way to get out.
Would have changed the entire trajectory of this
way
case
earlier. The guy, I think the first cop said he walked by that door around 8 a.m. And it was another...
Just a couple hours after they got there.
Multiple hours before they actually opened the door.
The father would not have found the body. It wouldn't have been moved.
Correct.
Who knows what kind of evidence would have been still there. Well, let's get into the ransom note, because this, arguably by some experts, is the biggest piece of evidence this case has.
This, to me, if we're going, what do we think early? This is the biggest piece of evidence I think points to the parental involvement somehow.
Well, historically, in kidnapping cases, the perpetrator, more often than not, leaves some kind of note demanding money in exchange for the return of the child they've kidnapped. Some of the most famous kidnapping cases in history began with the discovery of a ransom note. These notes are often the most critical piece of evidence investigators have. Sometimes it's the only evidence they have.
Correct.
By looking at the handwriting, the language used, and the specifics of the note, they can uncover clues about the writer and develop a linguistic profile.
Yes.
Which is what, in the docuseries, they do. The linguistic profile of the person that wrote this ransom letter. Writing ability, high.
They use big words like attaché, particularly multisyllabic words.
Yes. Language 1, which means their primary language that they learned at birth, English.
And you can tell that by the way that they form sentences.
Yes. Age, they said this one's a little harder to always pin down, but there's clearly no language that indicates this was a teenager or someone kind of young.
There's no slang.
So it's 30 plus for this. Gender, which is maybe the most interesting part of this, female.
Correct. They said
a lot of maternalistic language.
Listen carefully.
Yes.
Which is something that you would say to a spouse or a child. And when you get home, which they said is a more like a stay-at-home mom kind of language. Be like, hey, when you get home, make sure to do this.
Very casual and more comforting and warm.
And they said that the phrase, the people who have your daughter do not like you, that they said that, I mean...
Again, gender stereotypes be damned. It is maternal language, according to the FBI behavior analyst.
Correct. And if they said that male perpetrators are less likely to be concerned with people liking them.
Sure. Statistically, when a ransom note is written, it is straight to the point, conveys a position of power, and demands a large sum of money. However, the ransom note Patsy claims to have found that morning, neatly laid out on a step of their staircase, possessed none of these qualities and was actually more of a letter than a note.
Correct.
The note was handwritten, over 380 words, and almost 3 pages long. They said statistically, a ransom note is between 50 to 60 words.
And it's usually 4 things. We have your kid.
Yes.
This is how you're going to get the money. This is how much money we need. This is how we're going to contact you. Bye.
Yeah, and you get the fuck out.
Correct.
A recreation performed on the docuseries showed that it took 21 minutes for 4 different people to copy the note verbatim.
And they mentioned that they were copying versus having to think of it.
Yes. It would stand to reason that someone writing it for the first time would take even longer. Also, in the reenactment, they did not bother crossing T's and dotting I's. However, whoever wrote the original ransom note had made sure to do this, and there were a lot of them in there.
There's a lot of I's, and every one of them was dotted.
Takes a lot of time. Another red flag with this ransom note was the language that was used. We talked a little bit about this. For starters, the note begins, Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully. Very odd choice of words, as one cannot listen to a note, but like we said, it does sound like you were talking down to a child. Also, the perpetrator would want to seem powerful and authoritative. So why in the first few lines would they claim to be a, quote, small foreign faction?
Correct. That you would want to say, we are a terrorist organization located all over the United States, and we will get you. Not like, there's just like a few of us, and we have a problem with you.
Seem big and bad, yeah.
They do not seem big and bad.
No. The linguistic profile of this person that wrote the letter suggests that they have a high writing ability. Several large words are spelled correctly throughout. However, immediately following foreign faction, the word business is misspelled with 2 S's.
So it's Bussines.
Yes. According to experts, this misspelling is intentional to try and sell the fact that English is not the first language of the person who wrote this. Yeah, but then you use attaché.
Come on.
And a lot of other SAT words throughout it.
Correct.
That was the only word misspelled, was business.
It seems hastily written and to sort of sell.
Yes. Yeah.
Sell a
concept. It was a sales job. This whole
Ransom
Note was a sales job. According to linguistic expert Jim Fitzgerald, 76% of the ransom letter is extraneous. Throughout the letter, it is unnecessarily repeated. What will happen if the Ramseys do not comply? Quote, speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police or FBI, will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is marked in any way or tampered with, she dies. Very much like the person is trying to sell it. You've already said, we have your daughter, this is how you get her back.
And if you don't do it, you kill her.
She's going to die.
Why are you going to?
There's no need to go through this.
Correct.
Fitzgerald also says that the language used is maternal, like we said. Handwriting analysis concluded that the handwriting was very similar to Patsy's. However, it has never been completely confirmed.
They talk about it Steve Thomas talks about it in Jonbenet, and he took the handwriting sample to some Secret Service analysts, and they determined that they could not definitively rule her out. It's the way that she writes her A's in a sort of scripted way, and
they did definitively rule out John.
Correct.
But not her.
Yes. They could not rule her out.
Yes.
And this final part is what really sticks in my craw.
Really?
If you've seen photos of their home,
yes,
they were huge movie buffs.
Yes.
There were posters everywhere.
Yes.
And what stuck out about this Ransom Note words?
Several times in the Ransom Note, quotes from Dirty Harry and Speed appear. John Ramsey was a known movie lover. So,
correct.
It could have been he saw these things in there, or she did, or he was telling her what to write. I don't know.
Or, they've seen the same movies.
Yes,
I mean, arguably.
yes.
But the phrase, if we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies, is straight out of Dirty Harry. And that repetitive, she da-da-da-da-da, she dies, da-da-da-da-da, she dies, is out of Dirty Harry. And they don't say in Dirty Harry, catch you talking to a stray dog. It says if we catch you talking to a Pekingese.
Yes.
But then
it also
says,
at the end,
don't try to grow a brain, John, is directly out of Speed.
Yes.
And so they think that this is not an actual kidnapper, but someone who's trying to write what they think a kidnapper sounds like.
Yes.
Of if you're trying to sell the concept that this is a ransom note, what do you know about ransom notes? Only what I've seen in movies.
I'd probably cut a bunch of letters out of a magazine.
I would also do
that. Glue them to a piece of paper.
That is also what I would.
Which is a very common thing because then handwriting analysis is thrown out the window.
Yeah.
But that also would have to have been done theoretically prior to getting here.
Correct.
Well, another really weird thing about this was the amount of money that was asked for. It was well known that the Ramseys were very wealthy.
They owned 2 planes, a 30-foot yacht. They said his...
couple houses.
And they said his assets were about $7 million.
Yeah.
Over $7 million. And it was well known. It was in the newspaper.
Yes.
He was famous.
His software company had just reached $1 billion in sales that year, which had been made public just a few days before the murder. So why would the kidnapper only ask for $118,000 when they could have demanded millions? Ironically, or perhaps not, $118,000 was also the rounded amount of a bonus John had received earlier that year.
Yeah, a very wide pool of suspects could be people that worked with him, that knew how wealthy he was. They said Jonbenet was well known around his office. She would come up there, visit him, sit in his lap. He was kind of a workaholic, so one of the only ways they could see him would be to visit him at work. And that he had some disgruntled employees that we will get to in the suspect list in the next episode, but that had been fired for very random things. One of them, the guy had said on his application that he was not a smoker, and they found out that he was, and they fired him. He was real pissed off and sued them, and he got a settlement. So it was just certain things like that the cops thought, okay, well, this is a person that would know. He has an extra $118,000 laying around in cash because he just got it.
Even then,
but
you
still,
also know
rich.
He's got a couple million laying around.
He's got a freaking airplane and a yacht.
You can drive by their house and know that they've got more than $118,000.
And that is a weird number to choose.
A very specific number. We also mentioned The note clearly stated, quote, speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police or FBI, will result in your daughter being beheaded. This did not stop Patsy from immediately calling the police when she found the note. It also stated that someone would call them between 8 to 10 a.m. that morning to instruct them how to deliver the money. However, when the time came, neither John nor Patsy seemed nervous, and the call never came.
And they also said that he got the money out of the bank, worked it out with the bank, and it said in the note, if you get the money out early, we're going to be watching you, and we'll go ahead and give her back sooner if you get money sooner. So they read it at least to the extent of knowing to get the money out, but I would be paranoid that there's cops, and they even told the cops, this is what the ransom note said, and at that point, there was literally police cars in front of their house. So if you're being monitored and watched, like they said, if you talk to a stray dog, we're going to kill her, then you're just welcoming the police into your house.
Do you think if you found a ransom note and it say this is you, and
we have Lucy, your dog,
and it clearly says, please take her. I'll give you money.
You know what? Let me wait about 2 hours. She'll bring her back. She'll bite the shit out of you and nonstop bark. You will return her.
Yes. But would you, if it clearly said, I was trying to think of myself, if it clearly said, do not contact the police or we're going to kill her. Would I contact the police? I think I would.
But
because what am I going to do on my own?
Correct. I would contact the police and say, my kid's been kidnapped. The letter says that if I call you, they're going to kill her. Please do something. Help me. And then that's at least enough information for the cops to be like, we'll send someone in a public waterworks truck to come undercover and come and fix your water meter.
I probably would have read the entire note to the dispatcher on the phone.
Number one note I got on my report card in school is does not read directions throughout before beginning project. I would inevitably be the kid that says, read all these instructions to the end before you start. I distinctly remember, I believe it was in first grade, because Miss Huff was really nice. She's my first grade teacher. And it was a picture of a haunted house. And it said, read all instructions to the end. This is a goddamn trap. I'll tell you. I'm sorry. Miss Huff, you were nice. And it says, number 1, write your name in the top left corner. And then you get to number 21 and it says, do not do number 2, which was write your name. And I had already written my name and I look like an asshole.
Oh, well, I've also seen where teachers will say, it's a test, and it'll say, read this until, this even was done in college, read this till the end, read instructions through before starting, and then if you read the instructions through at the very end, it said, just write your name and turn it in.
Ha!
So people would do the entire test and didn't need to.
Well, I fell for it in first grade, and I probably would have fell for it in college, but...
So you would have called the cops then?
I probably would have.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I would have too. And I do read instructions, but I still, what are you going to do on your own? I would be so terrified. I don't know. Maybe I would have waited till at least 8 a.m., to see if somebody called. It's hard to say, again, what you would do in these types of situations.
Especially if you're the one that wrote the note.
Ooh, damn.
Fierce.
Well, another very strange thing. Typically, ransom notes are written prior to entering the crime scene.
This is where it just really solidifies it to me
strange.
That Patsy wrote this note.
However, this one was written in the Ramseys' house on Patsy's notepad and with a pen from the desk in the Ramseys' kitchen. The pad showed indentations of 2 practice notes. In addition, the pen and pad were put back in their original places after they were used. To take the time to do this in the house after having just committed murder is extremely high-risk behavior and very unusual. So you've gone up to JonBenet's room. You've gotten her down to the basement. You've done horrible things to her there. She's dead. You then go find a pad and pen.
The pad is on her writing desk. The pen is underneath the phone.
You get those out. You start writing a ransom note. You say, you know what? I could do better. You start writing a second ransom note. Still not satisfied.
I could do better. You
start with a third one. It takes you at least 21 minutes, probably more, in addition to the time you've already spent. So now, arguably, you've probably spent a half hour just writing this ransom note. After you've killed this kid.
You should have had a chihuahua like mine. She would have been barking the whole time someone was in the kitchen.
Who is going to stay in this house and risk somebody walking in on this?
And when we get to the discovery of the body in the crime scene, there was more evidence in that area of body staging and things that definitely were unnecessary.
Yeah.
And we're done. It's just high risk behavior. You've committed this crime, get out and run. And this person, the perpetrator, or even if it's not the same person that committed the crime that wrote the note writer is just taking their sweet time.
Yeah.
And also the pen is definitively that pen that was from the pencil cup underneath the phone, because they can do ink tests. Apparently, the fun fact for everyone that's listening, the Secret Service has a special catalog of all the inks ever.
Wow.
Because they test it for forgery.
Handy,
they're in charge of who forges money.
Oh.
And so if you find a forged $20 bill or $100 bill, they can trace that ink back to where it came from, exactly the pen, or the printer or whatever. So they were able to test the ink in this pen and definitively say it's not just like a Sharpie, it's that Sharpie.
Yes. Very interesting. And again, it was put back.
Yeah.
I don't put shit back in my own home when I haven't killed someone or worried about things happening.
Yeah, there's pens all over the place in my house. In my purse, the lid's not even on it. Some of the pens in my purse.
There's no telling what's happening.
I've destroyed, that's why I exclusively carry black purses. I have destroyed purses of other colors by having a lidless pen go asunder into the insides of my purse.
There's 2 ink stains on our cream-colored couch from me. From a blue pen that I just left willy-nilly.
And my bed has ink stains. I write in bed and there's ink stains in my bed. But I think that is also interesting as far as we're talking about high-risk behavior of putting the pad back where you found it and then putting the pen back where you found it gently and not just chucking it wherever you left it.
Yes. The ransom note was mysteriously signed Victory, SBTC. This acronym has plagued investigators for 20-plus years. Some believe it may have stood for Saved by the Cross.
Which the victory is like victory over Satan.
Yes. Subic Bay Training Center.
Which is where John Ramsey... Subic Bay is where John Ramsey served in the military. But later on, it has been debunked that it was a training center.
Okay.
So Subic Bay, the SB is accurate, but it was not a training center. He was trained somewhere else and just served at Subic Bay. So that was a false... kind of a false label.
There's a list of other possibilities, too, and we'll get into some of them in the next episode when we talk about possible suspects. But regardless of what anyone thinks it has stood for, nothing concrete has ever come of it.
Yeah, exactly. And she mentions it. The weird thing
she does mention it in the 911 call.
She mentions it in the 911. She doesn't say her daughter's name, but she says it says S. It says
well, the caller, the dispatcher says, do you know who took her? Does it say who took her? And she's like, I don't know. There's just a note. SB. You just read that entire note. Yes. You know who it says. That would be the first thing I would be like, yeah, it's SBTC. Don't know what that means, but they're claiming that they have my daughter.
Get on it. So a lot of the other stuff, too, is their behavior at the crime scene. And Detective Arndt said when she arrived that John was very cordial.
Yes. And he opened the door and was cordial. Which, again, it's very hard to say how one behaves in moments of grief. You laughed when the Challenger exploded.
All right. Let's not.
There's all sorts of things. Or, everyone reacts differently. But again, behavior analysis have studied these things for many years and have thousands of cases to compare them to of what is typical behavior and atypical behavior. And the Ramseys were not displaying typical behavior at their home when the police were there.
Correct. And they mentioned that his actions have basically afterwards I think he's more exonerable insofar as how he speaks in interviews. He does seem way more genuine, but we'll get into the interviews too in the next one. Sorry, we're already bumping up against time on this one and all we're doing is the first day of.
Yes.
But in some of the future interviews, his behavior is a little bit more controlled and hers, the behavior analysis is that she's maybe being deceptive or trying to convince herself of things. Yeah. So then, especially too in this next part, that their behavior is, again, a little, maybe slightly atypical.
They may have also just been weird, eccentric people.
That's true too. And then do you get accused of murder just because you're weird?
Exactly. Just because you don't act how 10 out of 10 people might act if a murder's taken place doesn't mean you killed your kid.
Yeah, that's true. God help me. I'm very weird.
They'd be like, she definitely did it.
She is a killer.
And you're like, no, I'm just a weirdo.
I'm just weird. I'm very specific and particular.
Well, at 1 p.m., like we said, Detective Arndt told John Ramsey and family friend Fleet White to search the house for anything out of the ordinary. According to Arndt, John jumped up, grabbed Fleet, and made a beeline for the basement. At approximately 1:05 p.m., John Ramsey opened the door to the wine cellar in the basement. While police had noticed the store earlier in the investigation, no one had bothered opening it.
Multiple police officers had not only walked by it or taking photos of it when they were photographing the crime scene.
As John opened the door, he reportedly yelled out, "Oh God!" as there before him lay JonBenet's lifeless body.
And the FBI agent said, frequently when they see staged crimes, that the perp will manipulate and have a friend with them to, quote-unquote, discover the body.
And to attest how, they were frantic.
Exactly.
They were so upset.
You have a witness there that later when the cops say, well, what was John's reaction when he saw the body? He ran to her. He freaked out. He grabbed the tape off her mouth. He picked her up. He held her on his hip instead of over her shoulder and ran up the stairs with her. And then he put her on the ground, which, like we said earlier, was sort of contaminatory to the body.
And we will get into more of that.
The next few hours and the next few decades.
Yes.
Who did this?
And the theories and suspects and what we think may have happened on the next episode.
And there's just... So far, I've read Perfect Murder, Perfect Town by Lawrence Schiller and JonBenét Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation by Detective Steve Thomas. I think I'm going to try... Before the next episode, I'm going to read John Ramsey's book. And... because I just like memoirs. And I might try to read...
It's good to get a rounded out, not just the family did
Correct.
this.
Yes, so I've read...
Because there's a lot of theories that it was an intruder, it was the family, it was the neighbor, it was... there's all sorts of theories.
So my brain is currently filled with the family absolutely did it, and so I'm going to read John Ramsey's book next. And much like any commercial I see for any item and immediately buy it, I will probably change my mind.
Can't wait to see after our computers have listened to this, what Facebook targeted ads we get.
God.
I've watched the A&E docuseries, as did you.
Also watched it.
And the JonBenét documentary, The Father Speaks.
Correct. Which is also on A&E.
Yes. I've also seen, although it's been a year or so, the casting of JonBenét, which isn't as much it's kind of a documentary, but it's also it's very interesting how they do it. But they have a lot of interviews with people that were friends of them at the time and lived in the town at the time. So it's interesting too.
And that's part of what gets one of the people that's interviewed in the docuseries is a friend of theirs, because at the time when this all went down, their friends totally shut down to the cops. Like nobody would talk to the cops. And one of their friends did talk to the cops, and she was basically completely
they dropped her like
ostracized.
A hot potato.
She was completely ostracized. So that's the things that we've looked at so far is those books and those. And we will continue researching.
But we don't record this for another week, the second part. So if you hear this and there's any book or documentary that you think we should watch to give us a better, some new evidence or new ideas, please message us on Instagram or email us or hit us up on Facebook and let us know, because we want to present multiple sides.
Correct.
Not just what we may think or what the popular opinion is.
I will say that docuseries, while it is a lot of experts, it is a reality show.
It's very slanted to one view.
It's dramatically cut. And at the beginning, they're like, we're just going to look at all the evidence and see where it goes. And then you just start to see there's no other way it could be anyone except for the family.
Yeah.
And every time that they look at any evidence. And as a lawyer, I mean, also just as a viewer, I just thought, okay, well, there's no way that every single piece of evidence all points to them.
Yes.
So the problem...
And that's like, again, that's with every article and documentary is they all have a skewed angle and they're going to present their side.
Well, everybody wants an answer. Yeah. You don't want to watch a movie that goes, well, it ends. You decide how it ends. When that happens,
why
people get pissed.
People are still so obsessed with this case.
It's true. So I think that's a good request that we have, that if there's a book or a documentary you think that we should read, please send it our way. But that's the next book on my agenda is John Ramsey's book that he wrote. They wrote a book. I might read both of them. They wrote a book while Patsy was still
him and
alive.
Patsy, yeah, she died in 2006 of ovarian cancer.
And then he wrote a book a few years after that called The Other Side of Suffering. And so that's the one I have. So if I can get a hold of the other one, I might read that one too.
There's one that I don't know the name of, but I know one of our friends has read it that really gives a lot of good evidence for the intruder theory.
Which friend?
Lindsay Goldup.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to hit her up and see what this book is, because she is also very obsessed with this case. So
well, send us what you got, sister.
Yeah. Well, if you do want to send us what you got, please do it on Instagram or Twitter at Sinisterhood Pod, or you can like us on Facebook at Sinisterhood. You can also email us at sinisterhoodpodcast@gmail.com.
That is correct. Where can they find you personally?
I am on Twitter at Christy or GTFO, and on Instagram at Christy M. Wallace. What about you, Heather?
I'm on Instagram at Heather VS The World, and I'm on Twitter at MCK VS The World. You can see some really rad pictures of me from the Dallas Comedy House.
You look
Christmas party.
Very hot.
My dress from Amazon.
My favorite picture is the two of us. Heather looks gorgeous in this green velour gown. I'm wearing a Christmas sweater, which I actually have on right now too, that has a sloth with a Santa hat on.
Very good. So please, if you have any theories or anything you want to share, please send it to us on there. And also, we want to say thank you so much for listening. We just hit today 300,000 downloads,
yes,
which is a crazy amount because we just hit 200,000 very recently.
It's overwhelming.
So tell all your friends like you have been. You've been doing a good job, guys.
Yeah, you guys are amazing, and it's so humbling and surreal and validating and so just wonderful. Christmas has come early this year.
Yes, and also thank you to people shout out to anyone who sent me a DM or sent a DM to the podcast Instagram that has any sort of story about where you were when you're listening to the show. Mm-hmm. It's so nice because some people say, this is cheesy, I've never written to a show before. First of all, I love to hear it. I'm very tired right now. I wish I was asleep. But I'm here to do it because people like it and people listen to it. And thank you. That kind of gives me the juice to keep going. I think there's no way I could read another book about JonBenét Ramsey. I'm going to die. And it's you're not. Read that book.
It's
because people say, I'm studying for finals, or I had a really bad day, or I'm 36 weeks pregnant on bed rest and I have nothing else to do. Thank you for making me laugh.
I feel that.
Girl, you know.
I'm going to compare it to Survivor.
Always.
Because I have to.
Please.
It's when they usually have a week left and they have the family visit.
That's it.
And it propels them to be able to have the strength to get through the last week, which is arguably the most difficult week.
Your DMs are our Survivor family visits. So please keep them coming because they make us...
we live for it.
Correct. They make us very inspired and joyful. Thank you.
Yes. And if we try and respond genuinely to everyone that we get a message from or comments on something, if we haven't, we apologize and we will try to get to it. There's a lot that come in. That's a good problem to have.
I know. We're
true. Trying to get to all of them.
And if you really, really like us, aside from telling us how much you like us, you should tell your friends. Mm-hmm. You can tag them on Instagram or Facebook, or just tell them to their face. That's always fun. Brian Harrington did it. Just grab their phone, subscribe for them. And if you can also like and subscribe and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, it means a ton to us and it really helps us grow like we have. So thanks for doing that.
Yes. And... will we talk to them before Christmas? Yes, our next one will come out on Christmas.
Yes. Merry Christmas.
But in the interim, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Happy Festivus.
Happy Festivus.
May your feats of strength go well, and may all of your grievances be aired.
As always, the devil rules the airwaves.
Keep it creepy.
Sinister.